Welcome to Wine Soundtrack South Africa. Listen to the passion with which producers narrate their winery and their world. In 30 answers, discover their stories, personalities, and passions.
Hello, friends and listeners of Wine Soundtrack. This is Morena Kalo, and today I have the pleasure of being joined by Nora Thiel from the very, very famous and well-known Delheim wine estate here in Stellenbosch. Nora, a very warm welcome to the show. Can you tell me a little bit more about yourself?
Hi, Morena. Thanks for having me on the show. Feel a little bit on the spot here because usually just stay up here far away from everybody on the mountainside of the Simonsberg, and it's nice to actually be chatting with you here today and sharing my story. Grown up on the farm. My parents, father German, my mom Dutch, and basically grew up in South Africa, and today continue living the legacy our parents basically built up here on the farm. Yes.
It's quite a legacy. As I said, everyone knows the name Delheim. It's been around for such a long time. And you mentioned you're situated on the foothills of the Simonsberg mountain. Can you tell me a little bit more about the land? How many hectares of land do you farm vineyards on?
So the property Delheim is made up of 3 properties actually. The one we're on at the moment is 150 hectares, used to be forestry. Unfortunately, due to the amount of wildfires we've had in the past 10 years, this we've reduced to 40 hectares of pine tree forestry. And then the other 100 hectares we've rejuvenated back to the natural fynbos. So we're doing a lot of conservation efforts here on the property on Delheim. 50 hectares of our grapes are grown up here, predominantly white wines, and then we have another property where 100 hectares of our red wine is produced, situated 10 kilometers away from here. And there we also have a little bit of conservation land, which we all manage as part of our Simonsberg Conservancy. And then we have a property called Delvera, which is predominantly rental activities. So, we spread out a little bit in all the different aspects of making a family wine farm tick.
And tell me, how much wine do you produce on average annually?
At the moment, we bring in about 700 tons, which translate with our all hand-picked quality, is what we do in Stellenbosch. And we produce for ourselves about 60,000 cases a year. We have a few collaborations that we work with. One of the collaboration is Nsiki Biela. She's making wine with us here at Delheim for her Aslina brand. Then we have collaboration wines with Woolworths in South Africa, and we do a few collaboration brands in Germany as well. So we have fun with doing all the different collaborations. So that all adds up to about 80,000 cases in the end, yes.
That's quite a lot, and great hearing about all these amazing collaborations. Nsiki, just for our listeners, is one of our first female black winemakers in South Africa, and she's really making great waves internationally, and I hope to bring an episode on her soon. However, you mentioned Germany. Where else can our listeners potentially find Delheim's wines around the world?
So I always joke we have a little bit of wine in Jamaica all the way to Japan. So we try and get to as many markets as possible. Some are easier than others. The European markets, because of our tourism industry, is easier to access. We've been a tourist destination since 1971, when my father and 2 of his friends started the Stellenbosch wine route. So that's helped to establish us quite firmly in the European markets. And then it's hit and miss around the world, where we, as a small family wine estate, can find the right importers to distribute our family wines, yes. Mm-hmm.
So,
anything from Jamaica to Japan.
Now, Nora, the story of Delheim is such an interesting one. I would love you to share just some insights on how your family came about acquiring and making this farm what it is today.
So, Morena, it's quite interesting. The older I get and the more I read up and learn about the history of the world and specifically my parents, I find it quite fascinating what all brought Delheim together to where it is today. So 1939, the property we're on up here, called de Driesprong, was purchased by Hans and Del Huizen's his parents as a wedding gift. They were German builders. They were building UCT, the Cape Town University, and the harbour at the time, and they could see that there was another war coming, and being Germans who'd been interned in the First World War in South Africa, they invested some of their money into property up here on the Simonsberg. They weren't really farmers, and through my grandmother's relationship with Del Huizen being the cousin, my father ended up coming out here just after Second World War to find a place to work, and that is how he ended up coming to South Africa. He'd lost his father in the Second World War, and he came to work on the farm here to basically just manage their property which they had bought. Interesting history going back to the Italians in South Africa at the time of the war. They were prisoners of war in South Africa, and many of the South African wine farms have our first tanks built by the Italian prisoners of war. And so Delheim also has the first wine tanks were built between 1942 and 1944 by Italian prisoners of war. So all in all, quite bizarre how and who was living and working in South Africa at the time. But that's the first tanks built at Delheim, and the first wine started flowing into the cellar in the early 50s, and my father's first actual wine that he launched in 1961 was launched at a big party, which I think he probably regretted afterwards, because wine was flowing, and unfortunately one of his really good Dutch friends had the good frame of mind to tell him she actually didn't think his wine was as great as he thought it was. Ooh. And so the first Delheim wine or his personal wine that was launched in 1961 was named after my father, being Sperling surname, and Spatz was the diminutive name that everyone called him. So she said Spatz, but this wine tastes like Dreck, which the German word for, well, I won't say the word, but for not such a good. And so the wine Spatzendreck, which actually means sparrow's dreck, was born with a little sparrow doing its droppings into the barrel. And so our first late harvest wine, Spatzendreck, became quite a household name in South Africa, because we were one of the first commercial wineries producing a semi-sweet late harvest, and it was made in a fun style. The label actually won the Worst Label of the World award in 1972. It probably still is the worst label in the world, as we continue with the history and legacy of this label. Many people, when you say Delheim in South Africa, they all remember Spatzendreck as the wine they learned to drink wine with. So very much historically part of South African wine drinkers' journeys was at Delheim.
Mm-hmm. I love that story. I've heard it before, and I just enjoy hearing it all over again, which is wonderful. So let's chat a little bit about the wines of Delheim as they are today. What is the most expensive wine in your cellar at the moment? What is it, and what does it cost?
So we made a wine for our father in his memory. It's called Iconoclast, a blend, a Cape blend, which means the wine has Pinotage in the blend. And this wine was launched just after our father passed away, and is 1,500 Rand a bottle. And it's actually a range which we're going to continue. Iconoclast meaning someone who isn't happy with what rules and regulations are established and sort of goes against what's happening in the world. So they move the boundaries of what everybody accepts as okay. And our father was very much instrumental in moving boundaries in the South African wine industry. He was one of the first people to help establish the estate wine concept. The Cape Winemakers Guild was one of the things he was also instrumental in. The first wine auction in South Africa was actually held here at Delheim. The Nederburg auction followed a year later. The Stellenbosch wine route was also established by him. He was, probably because he was an outsider from Germany and because he had to survive in the wine industry, he built up the tenacity to become what we all call iconoclastic. So that's the brand which we will be using for pushing the boundaries in winemaking, and we're launching another 3 wines this year with single varietals in the Iconoclast range.
That's really awesome, and I agree with you. He's really one of those people that everyone's heard of. You might not have met him in the industry, but you certainly know who Sperling was, that's for sure. Then on a normal day, if you've just had a tough day and you just want to grab the bottle that's giving you the most joy at the moment, that just kind of, you want to open because it'll make everything better, what wine is that for you right now?
Ooh, I usually say the wine that's open in the fridge. It's a bit like a doctor never has enough medicine in their house. We never have enough wine in ours and ready or cold at the time when I need it. So often it's a half a bottle that I grab out of the tasting room that, I haven't tried for a while. So, and often it's friends' wine, especially when we go out. I always try something of friends, and that's always, to me, drinking another winery with French friends making the wines adds a lot more to my life, and to my husband's, when we can sit and reminisce about, their family or what they've been doing, and that in the wine industry is really what keeps us going in this industry, is the amazing people in it.
Well, I think just being able to enjoy a glass of wine or a bottle of wine with someone, or even on your own, is really what makes wine so special, because it just has this capacity to make you reminisce, to make you relax, to make you be a little bit more introspective of things. And I think that's why so many of us love wine around the world. What is your opinion, Nora, on wine critics and wine competitions and ratings, that kind of thing?
I think it's something the industry still needs. I don't think we can expect people to just hear what we think of our own wines. So I guess it's a place where people feel comforted that someone else is rating the wines. I really believe there is a place for critics to rate our wines. I just think sometimes one doesn't realize that the vintage changes in how we make wine is all nature bound. So it sometimes feels a little bit critical when 2019 vintage was lean because of the vintage. There's not much you can do about a green lean vintage. You make the best possible wine out of it. So I think long term we've stood the test of time because we make good quality from our own grapes consistently as well as we can, and when we do have the leaner vintages we acknowledge them, and we probably wouldn't score as great as we'd hoped, but I think long term it's just being in tune with giving our consumers a solid business to enjoy a glass of wine from. Yeah.
I think consistency is key, but vintage variety, kind of variation, shall I rather say, is part of the story. It's part of what you are, and I think with what you do here at Delheim, it speaks to the terroir and the climate and everything that impacts on a business such as a wine farm. And I would hope that any critic or judge with their salts will recognize this. So yes, we have to hope for that. As a consumer yourself, do you have any preference in terms of red, white, sparkling? What kind of tickles your fancy?
Different occasions, different wines. I love everything from a sparkling through to the dessert wine. I think we just way underestimate our dessert wines, and we never give them enough credit for what they are. So it's really sometimes I prefer just drinking red, and other days it's just like I'm just glad that all the wines we have in our range at the moment, I actually enjoy all of them. People always ask me, which is your favorite one? I'm like, it's like asking me which is my favorite child. I definitely am not going to go there. Each one is different. Each one has its own place in the portfolio. So nice wide range of occasion wines. And
okay, here's a bit of a philosophical question. What do you think a non-wine drinker loses out by not enjoying your wine?
I think there's different things about non-wine drinkers, so it depends on why they're not drinking wine. I think if somebody tries the wine, they don't actually like wine. It's a different philosophy to people have tried bad wine and then they're put off by it. I think a very well-made wine is like a well-made dish of any food. It's just a taste that you'd like to share with people. Terroir in a bottle. It's like saying I feel you can actually taste a little bit of South Africa in our bottles. And what I love sharing with people is a wine that is actually aged a little bit, and time in a bottle is something you can't explain to anyone. You taste time, and that's something very special to share. And then also reminisce, where were you then and how well the wine aged, and it adds just a different complexity in our life. But I'm very wary of the fact that wine is alcohol. Alcohol has had very negative effects on many people's lives, and one needs to take cognizance of the fact that we're in the industry where a lot of people have been harmed by alcohol, and it's a product that I grew up loving because we produce premium, super premium products, but I've become more and more aware of an industry that needs to be aware of what what its harm can do to people. Yeah.
For sure, I think it's certainly something that everyone is waking up to and realizing that, something that can be so good and can actually do so much good also has the negative side, unfortunately. So some people read tea leaves to see into the future, and we like to think that in the wine industry you can potentially read the sediment that's left over in a glass of wine. If you were to read the sediment that is left over in a glass of wine, telling you potentially what the future holds for Delheim, what would you hope that sediment to say?
You're very, very philosophical today. So I hope I don't find too much sediment in my glass. Yeah, it's funny, you talk about sediment. I once got a postcard, an envelope in the old days when people still sent envelopes filled with letters, and the person was horrified with the crystals they found in the wine and thought they'd been poisoned, and were very upset about these the sediment that they found in their glass. So sometimes when I think about sediment in the glass, I'm like wondering what people still think about unfiltered wines. I'd love to see the legacy and heritage of a family business being protected for the legacy of our country's wine history, and I think we owe it to every person who's not been here, those who have, to enjoy and share a family wine business story and be part of something which can grow into being more aware of conservation, which we're doing a lot of on the farm, and just continue making better wines from an amazing terroir in South Africa, with a team of 65 people who care so much for the land and their product, that we can grow that and continue growing that as a family business in a very, very tough industry. I really hope that it's possible to keep the crystals in the bottles, not too much in the glass.
You and I both. So, Nora, I've got this image in my mind's eye of a little Nora running around here. It's so beautiful with all these beautiful big trees around. And one can imagine that growing up on this farm, it was kind of a natural thought as a little girl that you would follow in your father's footsteps. But was there a time where you kind of wanted to be something completely else to what you are today at the helm of Delheim?
I actually never thought about it. I mean, when people ask me, I sort of say, we were brainwashed into it. You worked every holiday, you worked every weekend. It was just a pioneering days. The family, all you did was being part of this growing tourist destination. So it wasn't always easy. We always laughed. The first visitors to the farm would always share the toilets in our house, so you would always have people walking in and out, and we would wash the glasses for the tastings that were done in the days. We had to wash in the evening in our dishwasher at home, and it had its toll on the family in terms of stress levels, and Christmases were always difficult because we were always open just about till the last hour before Christmas Eve, and you got brainwashed into this. But I did love the people aspect of it. I did, after school, go for a year to Europe thinking I want to go into art, and did decor design at the Stuttgart Opera for 3 months, and then realized I didn't really want to do that, and after traveling through Europe, doing au pair work for half a year, came back, started studying business economics and industrial psychology, and basically finished up being a student at Stellenbosch just when South Africa was turning into what we know today, a free country, and really there was just all the opportunities in the world to start exporting, and we were one of the first farms. And I literally walked out of university and started learning how to export wine with the paperwork that was needed, and it was unbelievably pioneering times that basically once again sucked me into continuing. There was no person doing exports at the time because there were no exports before 1993. So I literally started up our export department back then and just grew into the relationships with all our people around the world and continued to do that.
Okay. So you're very much living and breathing Delheim and everything related to the farm. But what else do you enjoy doing in your free time when the farm just can have a little bit of a backseat for maybe an hour or two?
I love hiking the mountains. We have the most incredible mountains in Stellenbosch and the Western Cape, and you'd find me with a backpack on and sleeping in the mountains with my tent next to a campfire any day. We're just so privileged to have grown up here in this area where if you just step out the back door, you're in fynbos areas where we have the most diverse plants in the world just in our backyard. I love them.
Yeah, the Cape Floral Kingdom is named that for a very true reason, distinct reason. Tell me, are you into movies, music, any specific genres that you particularly enjoy, or any movies that you always love going back to?
No. I have two sons that I was full-time working in a family business. I never had the time even to have maternity leave. I literally carried on working, and then you end up just putting all your energy back into which I felt most important, giving the kids the time they needed. Slowly getting into reading again, managing to read some good books. I love cooking. But I'm completely oblivious to movies and music. I just enjoy sharing what my husband has managed to dig out somewhere, because I just literally don't have the time to.
And if you had to share a sage piece of advice, a piece of life advice that you can really take on a life journey with you, what would that be? Or a piece of advice that's been shared perhaps with you that you've really cherished?
I think the most important thing I learned in my journey as part of the family business is just be true to yourself, but don't think other people will change. So it depends on how serious you are about making things work, so that you also need to change to make things work. So, yeah, especially in a family business where if maybe it was two men running the business, it would have been different to being my brother and myself. And I'd like to think that I've learned how to step into the tension rather than pull the tension to pieces, and I think that's what a lot of that is where we end up pulling into different directions rather than what's best for the business.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so if you could share a bottle of wine with anyone, alive or dead, who would you share it with? Why? And what wine would you be sharing?
Maybe I'd like to share a bottle of wine with my dad, because I don't think I had the conversations with him I thought I should have. He had Parkinson's for the last 9 years of his life, and in the end he couldn't actually talk. And I think a lot of the things I wanted to ask him, he couldn't say because he was unable to. A good bottle of Shiraz. He always said, you get a bottle of Shiraz out when your lover has left you. It always made me smile. I think I wouldn't mind sharing a good bottle of Shiraz with him. And I think a Shiraz from our old vines, Shiraz would have been, but one that's 20, 30 years old would be nice. Mm-hmm.
Okay, do you think we as humans will still be drinking wine in 2,000 years' time? And what do you think those wines will be like?
I would hope so. Probably not. I mean, I saw last night a digital print of a piece of meat, and it was tasted alongside normal meat, and I was once again shocked with what the future holds for us, and probably the future is produced wine that you didn't even need grapes for. I think I'm very old school. I'm very naive, and I'd love to say I wish we could carry on making wine in South Africa, in Stellenbosch. With global warming, I think maybe we would end up making the move to have vineyards all the way up to Iceland. Who knows what the future holds for where we could grow vineyards, but certainly things will probably look different.
I think, that question always makes me think as well. You just don't know what the future holds. But I think the idea of us still enjoying wine in 2,000 years' time is certainly a nice one. What 3 wines would you take with you to a deserted island? Any 3 wines in the world?
Ooh. Deserted island. I'll take a good bottle of red that I could keep a little while, because I might have to stay for a little longer, so I think I'll do that. I'll take a bottle of champagne along just to celebrate life. And I think especially on an island, if I need to cook something with my mussels, I take a good Chenin Blanc along so that I could drink it and cook with the mussels, a nice mussel soup. Yes.
Yes, please. I want to be stuck with you on that desert island. What winemaking areas in the world would you say are pretty exciting right now other than South Africa?
I think that's quite an unfair question. I think there's excitement everywhere in the world. I think everyone is pushing boundaries all over the world, whether it's whether we're talking Denmark, Spain, South Africa. I think it's everywhere. The Basque country in Spain is making some amazing wines, all the way to the Ukraine. I mean, I just think this industry is exploding in terms of people sharing industry knowledge across borders that we've never experienced before. So it's wonderful to see what's going.
Yeah, I think it's great also seeing the amount of innovation that's going on around the industry. That is certainly kind of keeping things very, very interesting. Okay, so I know you said that you're not that into music. However, we're almost done, and I'd really like to play a little game with you as we finish up. And how it works is I name 3 varieties of wine, or varietals, shall I say, and I'd like you to pair them with either a song or an artist or a genre that you feel represents this varietal. So it doesn't have to be very specific, but something that you feel kind of really, if you think of that varietal, it kind of brings this kind of music into the fray. So don't think too hard about it. There's absolutely no right or wrong, but I think I'd like to start with that Shiraz that you have after a breakup.
Oh, you're really putting me on the spot here. The Shiraz after the breakup. I think before you accuse me, take a look at yourself, Eric Clapton.
I like that. I think that's very appropriate. And Eric is a bit spicy at the best of times, so that works incredibly well. I'm going to be even more specific, and I think for this interview, I would love to know what music you would pair with the Spatzendreck.
Spatzendreck, probably a German. It would be some German folk music. And I can't even think of any names.
That's okay. I mean, German folk music says it all. I think I can imagine an Oompa band.
Yes, we've had those parties here in the 80s, the Oompa bands with the Spatzendreck. So it's just some memory coming up for that, and yeah.
That completely works. Okay, then I think it makes sense maybe to throw in Chenin Blanc.
Chenin Blanc. I think Chenin Blanc is a South African grape, so I would go for a South African artist. And I think Chenin Blanc is something we missed the opportunity in the 80s to make superb dry Chenins with, so we used it for our sweet wines. I would even go as far to say Miriam Makeba, some artist we weren't even allowed to listen to in the 80s. I remember my mom illegally having a record or two, and we would listen to her music, which it's part of our culture we weren't allowed to be part of. So to me, that sort of is part of the Chenin Blanc history, something like it's so transformed. It's a bit like our history. Yeah.
And Miriam has such a very distinct voice, beautiful voice. So yes.
And just amazing. Yeah.
Very, very nice one. Thank you, Nora, so much for joining me today. It was an absolute pleasure to be able to chat to you. Before I sign off, please can you just remind our listeners, number one, where they could potentially find you online, social media, and also if they were to ever make their way through to Stellenbosch, what they could expect to experience if they were to visit Delheim.
So Delheim, I always tell people, look on Wine Searcher around the world. It's amazing where our wines pop up. Look on our website. You could even just pop us an email at info@delheim.com, and we could point you in the right direction. And we're open 7 days a week, all year, except the 4 holidays we closed. We live and breathe the wine farm, so you might find one of us with our Jack Russells running around. If you come soon enough, you might still find our mom here, and we have a beautiful terrace overlooking in the distance Table Mountain, so we serve lunch and breakfast there. We have our old tasting room where you're welcome to come and taste wines, and if you book in time, you could also do a cellar tour, so we show you where we actually make the wines. And hopefully in the future we'll be doing some conservation outings as well. So yeah, I'd love to see anybody feels like driving up our valley. We're right at the top of the Simonsberg Knorruk Valley.
Mm-hmm. And there's always so many things that you're busy with, and festivals and jazz music and mushroom hunts in the winter. So there's a lot to do always at Delheim, and I really highly recommend our listeners to visit the farm if they ever make their way here. Nora, a huge thank you from me. It's been a pleasure chatting to you, and thank you very much.
Thanks for listening to a new episode of Wine Soundtrack South Africa. For details and updates, visit our website winesoundtrack.com.